You know what you look like?
Thing one, thing two.
Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, but the video for No Rain. You know that Blind Melon.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's some.
Right.
It's a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
All right. Good morning, Chair Postman, members, Garrett, Vollendroff, staff, and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thanks, Dustin. We'll convene the board caucus meeting for Tuesday, June
Nope.
27th?
Yeah.
Yeah. October 31st, because it's Halloween. Happy Halloween, everybody. Our first item is a social equity update. Licensing Director Becky Smith is going to give us an update on a survey done on the applicant pool. Hello.
good morning, Chair Postman.
I'm going to take you completely
Try to
seriously.
take me seriously.
Are you
Remember
thing one or
Halloween.
thing two?
I am, of course. thing
You're
one.
thing one, of course, right? Sorry, you are the director. Right.
And good morning, board member, Garrett and Vollendroff. I wanted to, last week we had shared in the board meeting that staff were completing the survey on all the applicants. And I wanted to share that information with you because we have had folks begin to fill out the survey. And certainly, you know, that not in its entirety, we haven't had all 42 applicants fill out the survey, but we do have a good pool that I wanted to share with you this morning.
Great.
So here you can see that the demographic survey is, you know, that what we're looking at is a number of folks that are Black or African American, and that is 12. Hispanic or Latino, 3, so 14.29%. White or Caucasian, 3. The Asian, 1. Then we have prefers not to say, 1, and then other. So they identify as other as 1. And again, you know we only have 21. I said 22 folks that completed the survey. We did have 22 people complete the survey. 21 answered this question. And again, I think it's important just to show what the demographics look like for the survey, because if you remember, you want to move to the next slide. If you recall, when we had Ponder also sent out a survey when we first, when applications were first began to be processed, and you can see here that 47% identified as Black or African American. And again, just the demographics look a lot similar, of course, in a smaller, smaller percentage, because we only do have 42 people going through the application process. But we're happy with the results. I will say, you know, as of right now, I don't know that we'll see more than 42 people fill out the survey, since we have had contact and people have begun to process their applications. People tend to, in general, fill out a survey at the very beginning or in the middle, and then they just stop. That doesn't mean that we won't know the demographics of who these folks are, or, you know, whether or not, because we asked other questions. We asked about male or female, veteran, you know, that the ownership, if they were 51% owners, that there were other questions included. We will take a look at once we get the other information back, like criminal history. If folks choose again to fill it out, that we'll have a better understanding of who those people are that are going through the process for social equity. But I do think, considering the the process, all of the information they had to fill out as part of the application process with Ponder and with LCB, that this really shows a good mix of the folks that were most harmed by the war on drugs. I want to stop and see if you have questions.
I have no questions, but great.
So what I'm surmising with all of this, you're saying that as of now, we have 50% of the folks that got in that have filled out the survey. 47% African Americans applied. And so far with the 50%, we have 57% African Americans that has gotten into the industry.
Correct.
under social equity.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
which are great numbers. I mean,
Yes,
it's
they
what
are
we're going
great
for. And I, as you all know, I'm not a math person, but we have half the respondents at this point, but it matches pretty closely to the big pool. So
Yes.
one might assume as you get more, though I agree, you probably won't get a lot more. Will you be able to update? We'll continue to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
Uh,
and we'll definitely come back and update the board, either at caucus or in the board meeting.
Okay, that's great.
And then there was one last piece that I wanted to share, if you don't have any other questions, because there was a question that was posed. And I'll try to answer it. If not, then I'm going to have my thing to Nicola Reed come up and answer the question or respond.
Oh, I hope there's a question. So yes.
That in the beginning, last December, we sent out a letter to local authorities that were where there was openings. So whether they were a city or a jurisdiction, whether they were the city of Seattle or King County, we sent it to about 300 local authorities, letting them know about social equity licenses coming up. But I think that that a question was posed to us is whether or not that folks had to stay within their allotments and within a city. And of course, they have to stay within their jurisdiction, but not within their city allotments. That, but I think that part of the struggle is that they're going to the cities and asking if they can, that they're looking at maybe setting up their business in a particular city or town. And the jurisdiction is coming back and saying, no, we don't have enough allotments. That we're going to send another letter out to those 300 plus. But I just want to remind, and we're going to also work with our investigators and our staff to remind the applicants that sometimes it's not us that the problem is. Sometimes the barrier to get over is the allotments in that particular city. So for instance, Bellevue and Renton, they have their own allotments. That's not something that's determined by the board. That's something that's determined by the city themselves. So sometimes that will be the barrier. And we're certainly happy to answer any questions for our applicants, try to assist them. That's what Sarah Davis is there for, is to help them through this process. So we are going to be reaching out and pushing more of an effort to make sure that folks understand that and know that we're here to assist them in this process.
Okay.
Questions?
That's good. When you say Bellevue and Renton has their own, that means that they can do what they want to do on how many folks they let into their municipality?
That's correct. And
Okay.
and both jurisdictions have in the past. They've limited the number of licenses that they're willing to issue. And in the city of Seattle, so all of these cities or towns also have other things that prevent folks from going into those towns. And for instance, city of Seattle has, they can't be within 1,000 feet of another retailer. And so that will make it difficult for someone to go in and open business in the city of Seattle at this time.
Okay, so and I think it's good that you're sending out the letter again, because as we know, there's turnover and some people take the knowledge with them when they're no longer in those positions to know that they can allow more. Have we heard from a lot of folks that have gotten in that they're having difficult finding locations?
We have not. That's not right now. They're, I think Aaron and Linda shared this at the last board meeting. The difficulty right now is finding
Okay.
a way for to finance their businesses.
Okay.
Jim?
Becky, thanks for the update. I was wondering, when you send out the letter to the local jurisdiction, is that addressed to the executive or the mayor? Who's the letter actually addressed to? Do we have specific contacts?
We do have specific contacts, and years and years ago, and we do it every so often, we ask for an update of who they'd like that letter to go out to or be sent directly to. Sometimes it's the mayor, sometimes it's the,
County commissioner.
county commissioner.
Okay, getting back to member Garrett's comment, because of turnover, I think it too is a good idea that we resend the letter. I wonder if, because I know when I worked at King County, sometimes letters would come to me and they would have been in somebody's desk or on somebody's desk for weeks at a time and maybe even longer. So that happens. I wonder if it would be helpful to give to CC the letter to the applicant in that particular jurisdiction so that they also have a copy. Just a thought. So.
That's a great idea, and we can certainly do that for those applicants in those jurisdictions.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I would say just period, all 42 applicants have a copy of that letter so that they know when they go into these areas, they can't say it's the LCB. They have a copy of the letter from the LCB
Yeah.
saying they have the authority to allow more allotments.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
yeah, I think that's a great idea. And we've also sent them a letter that if they need a letter for a landlord, we have a letter for a landlord explaining that they're social equity applicants. That again, I think that that as much as we can assist applicants in this process, we certainly have, we want to do that. So we will do that as well.
And
Great.
Becky, on the financing, so if an applicant, I think we kind of talked about this on one of our one-on-ones, they are allowed of someone to what's the word, loan them money or whatever, but they can't put those folks on their license if they weren't originally on the license. Am I saying that correctly?
That is correct. They can be financiers. They can't be part ownership of that license as a condition.
Right.
Yeah, as a condition of a financier.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So on the location, I think it's great, for us to give that letter to everybody so they know but local governments still have that authority, and they will under the next 5080 as well, right? I mean, we have even more flexibility in locating things, but local governments retain the right to restrict by zoning, by whatever they want, right? And
That's
we can't.
correct.
And the legislature has been reluctant to apply any pressure, which I think appropriate, and we certainly don't have the authority to do that. So people need to understand that that's not going to change.
That's correct. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not.
There'll be
gonna
more
change.
flexibility, but not any more authority to force the city to do something or a county that they don't want to do.
That's right.
I did see the two Pasco stores are close to opening, and that's a place where they had up until just months ago had said never. And so, I think that, to Jim's point too, there's turnover in local governments. You found out when you did the survey back in 2021, people would say, oh, I didn't even know we were doing that. So yeah, I think the letters and everything else we're able to do could spark some conversation, at least at the local government level, but we just can't force them to do it.
Yeah.
Or would we? So, yeah. Okay. Any other questions for thing one?
Just trying to think of a question for Nicola so I can get her up there, but no, I have no question.
We can just make sure that thing two confirms
All
what
right.
thing one said. I get to, I realize I'm the only person in this room of like 8 people who's not in costume. I feel really awkward. I feel like I'm wearing something weird,
You mean you're not in costume?
Yeah, I'm
That's
dressed as a
good.
cranky old man today.
That's good.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you both. Okay. Our next item is update on our employee survey. This was a follow-up to our employee engagement survey, and member Vollendroff was the board lead on this, along with then Jessica Dang, our policy and performance manager. And I am really interested. Oh, and Jim Weatherly, our DEI manager, is also here. He was key in this. I didn't see you there, Jim. Anyhow, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you all have to say. So I'll turn it over to whoever's in charge.
That would be Jessica.
Well, good morning, Chair Postman, Board Member Garrett and Vollendroff. I am Jessica Dang, the Policy and Performance Manager for the agency. Dustin, do you have our slides?
Pulling them up right now. Give me just a sec.
Okay. So what I'm going to share, what we're going to share with you today is a little bit about the process of the focus groups, why we did them, the purpose, some data from the focus groups, and then Jim Weatherly will be sharing some of the themes that we heard from the focus group, and then Board Member Vollendroff has a few words as well about some improvement ideas. So we'll just hold for a second. Here we go. So you can go to the third slide. Okay. So as Chair Postman mentioned, we did these focus groups as a follow-up to our employee satisfaction survey. So we held the focus groups over the summer and early fall. And the purpose of these focus groups was to promote open, productive conversations, help us discover the why behind some of our results, and then explore ways that we can improve the employee experience here at LCB. So we held 7 sessions around the state. They were about 2.5 hours. We had 6 to 14 participants per session. During the focus groups, we did a pulse survey and participants had a worksheet that they filled out in real time. And then we conducted a follow-up survey. We had the pleasure of going to Spokane, Tacoma, Federal Way, Mount Lake Terrace, and we did a couple of sessions here in Olympia. So the 4 questions that we focused on during our focus groups that came from the employee engagement survey was question 20, which is the net promoter question. I would recommend my agency is a great place to work. At my workplace, I feel valued for who I am as a person. Question 5, I have opportunities at work to learn and grow. And then question 11, I know how my agency measures success. And we chose these questions because these questions had a high correlation to overall employee satisfaction. And we thought that by focusing on these questions and uncovering some insights, that it would help us improve our overall satisfaction scores. But to drill down a little bit, we asked these questions in the focus groups. So to help us understand where to make some more specific improvements. So for question 20, we wanted to talk about what we could do as an agency to make it more likely for employees to recommend LCB as an employer. 16, we wanted to understand what makes you feel valued at work. For each individual, that's a real personal thing. And then same with learning and growing, understanding what learning and growing looks like to the individual, and then what types of learning and growth opportunities are most meaningful. And then lastly, we asked, what should the agency consider as measurements of success? We were looking for some ideas on that last question there. Next slide. So when we look at the participation by division, we had about 64 individuals participate in focus groups, which is a pretty good turnout. We had high participation from our enforcement education division, which we really appreciated, and that obviously is likely to the fact that we traveled out to the field offices there. We had participation from the director's office, licensing, finance, all of the divisions were represented. Then you go to the next slide. As I mentioned in the beginning, we did do a quick pulse survey in the actual focus group to see if there was any difference between how people responded when they did the survey in 2022 to till the time period that we were looking at for the focus groups. And there was really not much of a difference in terms of responses. They did the exact same, they answered the exact same questions, but just provided this as we did ask participants to complete this pulse survey, and these are those results. We received worksheets from almost every participant. The ones that are missing are likely the ones that we did virtually. So I will stop there and see if there are any questions before I pass it on to Jim Weatherly.
Yeah, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me how those results from the agency-wide engagement survey match up to enterprise-wide, government-wide? I mean, are we low on those?
That's a great question, and I don't have that in front of me right now, but I'm happy to provide that. I can edit the slide and provide that.
Is it out of a scale of 5?
Yes.
So 5, yeah, okay. I think some of those strike me as a little low, but okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I think, Jim, you are up. Jim Weatherly.
Thank you for that, and good morning, members Garrett, member Vollendroff, and of course, Chair Postman. I'm sorry I'm not in the room there. It looks like quite a bit of fun there with the costumes and whatnot happening. So thanks for setting off the day in a nice way as well, and thanks for having us today too. So after we got all the results together, the three of us spent some time really looking through and kind of synthesizing what we were hearing and seeing in the written feedback. And then what you see there on the screen are the 3 themes that emerged: career growth, culture, and communications. And next slide, please. So what you'll see on each of these 3 slides is sort of a mixture of sort of high level, kind of overarching theme. And then what we've tried to do is sprinkle in some of the actual feedback that we received from individuals here at the organization about their experiences at the agency. So you'll see those represented on the left-hand side of the slides and then underneath. So overwhelmingly on this feedback theme, career growth, we heard a lot of people talking about just being honored for the skills, not only that they're bringing to the agency, but the skills that they're learning here as well. And sort of this craving also kind of in tandem with that to think about ways that they can enhance their learning. And so we got a lot of feedback, tremendous amount of feedback about not only training opportunities, but also access to training and making sure that we act more in kind of a proactive approach to getting training opportunities out there, proactive approaches about what our training budgets actually look and feel like, and just helping staff understand how to do that ask, and also working with leadership that may be in charge of those decisions to make sure that we are getting this information out. We also heard people talking about this desire to understand how their individual role works in a bigger, larger picture here at the agency and the services that we provide. So lots of conversation around cross-divisional approaches, learning how your one piece of this agency works with and for other divisions and certainly the community at large. And then this idea overwhelmingly about people really enjoy being at the LCB in our agency. And so they're constantly looking for opportunities to grow, not only from a pay sense, but other skills that they could learn, thinking about succession planning and other places in the agency that, again, they could do even more good work than they're already doing within the agency. Next slide, please. And then under this theme of culture, we heard things like recognizing the big and the small. There were a couple examples given of morning huddles where in that, 10 to 15 minute time frame, not only talking about the tasks at hand, but noticing when people are just asking how are things outside of work, and people really responding to that, and kind of how that dovetails nicely into feeling like you belong where you work in your organization. Around this culture piece too, there were conversations about keeping up with the times, specifically talking about technology, access to software that may be needed or, people curious about to help their work. And of course, the ongoing conversations we see across any organization around hybrid, remote, how to be on site, just all the trends that are kicking, post-COVID here, and how we do work in these times. And then, of course, the ability to feel safe. And that included, pieces around mental health and our wellness here. And we got some very specific division feedback that you'll see represented on a handout that Jessica put together for us that is very division specific about benefits when somebody's hurt on the job, et cetera. So there were some conversations there. And then you'll see in the quotes, this was a new phrasing that I had not heard here, but we heard it a few times around, this opportunity to fail forward and giving all of us opportunities to kind of work in maybe new projects or work groups, and that it's okay if there's a misstep, that we're there to help you learn what to do differently the next round. Next slide, please. And then there's a little crossover here from a quote that was on the prior slide too, but you know, we saw this theme around communications and talking about and celebrating all of the things, the big, huge projects like SMP, social equity. But again, you know, all levels of that, somebody getting through their probationary period, you know, just the small things that we sometimes don't notice. But also, we saw in this area a lot of feedback to that question about how we measure. And I know Jessica's going to get us a specific answer to your point, or to your question there, how we compare across other agencies. But I do know in the past that that specific question on how we measure, a lot of agencies struggle, and employees, self-included, struggle on how to answer that. But what was really interesting and frankly cool about these focus groups is that we got a lot of specific feedback about not only how we could measure potentially differently, but things that we've done measurement-wise that are very much in line with our strategic plan, that staff had a lot of feedback on, and overwhelmingly positive things that we could try or enhance. And again, that feeds into how we tell our story, which is part of the culture here, especially for newer staff, but also for our seasoned staff, getting that opportunity to talk about lessons learned and things that they've seen over the years and sharing that wisdom. And part of that wisdom sharing, you know, is this greater need or this increase in transparency from all levels of leadership, really answering the why as to why we're making the decisions that we're going to, and ideally doing that from a proactive versus reactive stage. So again, you know, I've seen and done focus groups elsewhere, but I just have to say again, that the amount of positivity that people brought to these settings, and very personal things that they shared, was just something that made me smile each time that we left, or the three of us would have this debrief, and just was really proud of Jessica and certainly member Vollendroff, and frankly our staff, for, you know, collectively setting a stage where people felt like they could share. And it was really important before we brought this information to the management team and to you all here as our board, that we checked back with participants of these groups to make sure that we were hitting this on the nose where they wanted us to when we brought it here. So I just wanted to point that out as well, that there were a lot of asks to make sure that we were communicating also the information that we heard back from the field. Next slide, please. Jessica, I'll hand it over to you unless there are any questions of me or the group.
Don't see any.
Great, thank you all.
So thank you, Jim. As Jim mentioned, I put together a handout, which hopefully you have or you'll receive shortly after today's meeting, around each theme. So what we heard, some of those big buckets that Jim mentioned, and then some really practical ways around what it looks like. So Jim mentioned some of these things, but for example, under culture, recognizing the big and small things, we heard things like, remember my birthday, remember my agency anniversary, like celebrating those moments, having the ability to ask for input, or your supervisors asking for input. We heard that a lot, that people really appreciated that. A few other things I might point out here, under celebrating our successes under communication, some things that we heard that we should be communicating is feedback from our customers. We heard a lot about work that our team members are doing in the community and how they're connecting, and I had never heard those stories before, and I thought, oh, we thought that would just be a great opportunity to hear more about the work that our team members are doing in the community. So we are going to, as Jim said, we provided the same feedback to the people who participated in the focus group and to management team. And then if you can go to the next slide, I think it's our what's next.
Can I ask you a quick question about that, Jessica? Can you give me an example of what Trevor, you have about team members working in the community? What sort of thing are we talking about there?
Can I give that answer,
Yes.
Jessica?
Thank you,
so, Chair Postman, thank you for asking that question, because I think it really points to some what I would call almost hidden work that we do that we really should be celebrating. We have participants, for example, in E&E who participate in local prevention groups in their community. So they are connected with local groups that are helping deal with how do we keep product out of the hands of young people from a broader community perspective. And we've got enforcement staff who are volunteering on their own time, not their own time necessarily, but they are not required to do that, but they are seeking out these community groups in areas that they're responsible for so that they can actually be a part of the community, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. So real quick here, as mentioned, we did share this information with the participants on the 17th. We talked to management team. Then we're here today and we'll share these results also out with the agency today. So we'll be sending a message out, letting folks know about the results from the focus group. And then the management team will start in earnest on strategic planning next month. And this information from the focus groups, is going to play a big role in those conversations around some of the things that we might prioritize to do as an agency over the next 5 years. So I'm excited for that. Next slide, please. And I will turn it over to Board Member Volendroff.
Thank you. So a couple of things before I get into this specific slide. I want to, first of all, acknowledge both Jessica and Jim and their work that they did in this particular area. It was great working with both of them on this, and I think it demonstrates our commitment to improving our employee work environment. I also want to assure other board members that when I went to these meetings, it was great for me personally because I got to see a lot of sites that I otherwise hadn't seen. I got to meet a lot of employees who I otherwise wouldn't have been able to meet. But I always emphasized a couple of things. And one is that I was not there representing myself. I was representing board members who were supportive of my participation and in this overall process. I also took the opportunity before every session with employees to check in with our director, Will. And I did that for a couple of reasons. So we started these right around the time he started working at the LCB and, throughout the duration up until a few weeks ago. And he wasn't able to go to all of them because he was onboarding and all that kind of stuff. So I always wanted to make sure and check in with him and provide a message to employees from Will. And then when we were in Olympia, he was actually able to join us for one of the sessions. So it was great. It was a great opportunity for staff to hear a message from him and also to meet him when he was there in Olympia. I also wanted to actually, I'll stop. I was going to go on a little bit longer than I should. So I'm going to get to my slide here. So what we did during the process is as we heard things from employees that we felt like we could begin to have conversations about, we did. And so I meet with Anita on a regular basis. And one of the improvement ideas came up was related to exit interviews. And it appears that we have an inconsistent policy or practice, rather, across the LCB about exit interviews. And there were a lot of questions raised during the focus groups around which sections do exit interviews. And then of those sections that do exit interviews, what happens to that information, etc. So as I met with Anita and I would meet with Will, we began talking about that. And there's already discussions in management team about the exit interview process. And, from my perspective, I mean, our employees are obviously one of our greatest resources, and hearing from them as they leave from both a, what can we learn that was going well in their area that their supervisor was doing. We want to learn those things, as well as people who are leaving for other reasons that maybe they're dissatisfied. We want to learn from those as well. So there's an example of us actually already putting in action some of the feedback that we heard along the way. The other thing we heard about is we heard about assault benefits, and I've actually raised that with Anita. We're asking questions about that. And there are benefits that happen if you get injured on the job. And we're just looking into what are those benefits across the state and how do those compare to our staff's assault benefits. And, I don't know whether we can or can't do anything about that. Some of that may be union negotiation. I mean, there's a lot of factors that come into play, but we wanted employees to know that as we were hearing things, we were actually taking some action and having further conversations about that. And the last one on here is we heard a lot about recruitment, and obviously given the vacancy rate across the agency, but particularly in E&E, we heard a lot about recruitment. Along the way, we began to hear about retention as well. And one person in particular said, I don't think we have a recruitment problem, we have a retention problem. And whether that's true or not, I don't know at this particular point, but I thought it was a really intriguing question to ask and to go back. And so Anita and I have begun to have those conversations. What is our turnover rate by section within the LCB? What is the tenure of staff within those sections? And it also, again, points back to the need for exit interviews so we can learn from those folks who are not staying with the LCB throughout their for long durations of time. So those are just a few examples of things that we started having conversations as we were hearing them throughout this process. Thank you, Jessica. Any questions actually before we move on?
I don't
Great.
know. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, and real briefly here as we wrap up the conversation, as I mentioned, we did provide a survey at the end of every focus group to check in and see how people felt about the focus groups. And we had overall really high positive ratings. So out of 5, we had 4.8. And this was also important so that we could make adjustments in between focus groups. So if we heard, hey, we needed more time on this question, we could pivot as needed at our next focus group to make changes. So people, overwhelmingly, we had a good response, and we asked individuals if they would like to do focus group, if they would recommend if we did focus groups again, and 97% of people who attended our report out a couple of weeks ago said yes. So, and then we did have some suggestions here for improvement. So more time, do them more frequently. And then we did have a few sessions where we had management and line staff in the room. And we knew that could happen. And so we heard some feedback about that maybe we did them again, think about separating management from line staff. And I think that is all I've gotten. We are open for any more questions that you may have.
So today we're getting the employees will get the survey, just get the deck, whatever you're sending.
Yeah, so planning today that we'll send out the deck along with the link to this presentation this morning.
That's great. Yeah. I look forward to digging into it a little more myself. Thank you so much for all the work, all of you, Jessica and Jim W. Just shows what the two of you do for us every day. This kind of engagement is great. And Member Volendroff, I think we're really fortunate to have had you playing a role on this. So much appreciated, since 2 of us can't be there.
Yeah.
Much like 3 of us. I think it's great that you were there in all of them, and I'm glad we're following up on the survey. It's great. Thank you all.
Yeah, just one quick item about that. So we heard more than one time appreciation from staff having board presence and recognizing that there was that they felt like the board really did take the survey serious and appreciated the fact that we were participating at this level. So I think it was great that we were able to do that.
Yeah, that's terrific. Good. Okay. All right. Nothing else. Thank you all again. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing
Thank you.
deck. And that's the last thing on our agenda today, except for board member and executive assistant reports. Dustin, anything today?
No, thank you, Chair.
Members? Garrett,
Nope, I have nothing
more to add? No? Okay. Well, then we will adjourn and we'll be back next week for caucus and board meeting next week, I think. Right? Yeah. Okay. Just checking.
All right.
Okay, great. We're adjourned.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Yep.
He's too stoned to answer.